The Chosen Season 2, Episode 3 came as a big shocker for all of us who were watching the live stream. It was really exciting. If you're watching this video, you've already probably, maybe, possibly seen my Episode 2 review of The Chosen, and that was the only one I was planning on making tonight, but that's because it was only planned for them to air Episode 2 tonight, according to what we knew prior to the live stream. But turns out they decided to pull a fast one on us, and they released not only one episode, but 2 episodes tonight, and therefore I am making 2 reviews. Later on in this video, if you hear a little noise, that's because my episode 2 review is actually currently rendering right now, and it makes a little noise whenever it finishes rendering. And so, as soon as I finish recording this video, I'll probably upload the episode 2 one, and so it's just been a lot of exciting stuff over here. But, that being said, Season 2, Episode 3 of The Chosen, absolutely fantastic. I'm actually having a tough time processing both of these episodes because they were both so amazing. I can't decide which one I liked more. This episode is called Matthew chapter 4, verse 24, and so I figured I'd probably start off by just reading that verse so you could get an idea of why it's called that. And the verse reads this: "So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, those having seizures and paralytics, and he healed them." Right? And this picks up exactly with what they'd said in episode 2, that Jesus was going up through Caesarea Philippi onto Syria and stuff like that. Well, that's Matthew 4:24. That's what this whole episode's about. And man, I thought it was an amazing episode. I thought, just like episode 2, I'm going to give this an A+, because it was just fantastic. I think it also probably helped that it felt like a great Christmas gift that we got 2 episodes of The Chosen in one day. Like, what? Man, that's just too good to be true. Now I'm kind of sad because that means we're already almost halfway done with the season. I'm like, oh man, it makes me really sad. But man, that was a very great episode. I think it was a bit of a shorter episode. I haven't looked at how long each one was. I'll have more details like that once I actually sit down to do our episode breakdowns, which I'm going to do hopefully over the next week or 2 weeks or whenever I actually have time to do that. But this felt like a little shorter episode, but man, they packed a whole bunch of stuff in here, and I am excited to talk about it. And so let's do that. So basically, there's one thing it struck me as odd whenever this episode started, and maybe you noticed it if you're watching the live stream, or I guess if you're just watching in general, but there wasn't an opening scene before the opening credits. And immediately, something felt off to me. I was like, hold up. Did they skip something? Because, you know, episode 2 ended, then it cut to Dallas talking, and then it said, like, hashtag shut Dallas up or something. And then he announced episode 3 was going to air, and then it immediately cut to the opening credits, and I was like, hold up, what's going on? Like, kind of threw me off. But then, after the opening credits, you understand why they had to do that. Because the whole opening scene of this episode is one super, super long shot. I don't know if you noticed that while watching it. But this was one, it was beautiful. Like, it was actually really impressive that they pulled this off, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. Because literally, it opens up, and it's just following, I think it starts off with Philip and Matthew talking, and Matthew's just talking about, like, he's wanting verses to memorize and stuff like that. And then it just never cuts. It goes on for a few minutes, probably like 5, maybe 10 minutes, maybe even longer than that, I don't know, until it actually cuts. But basically, it starts off with Philip and Matthew talking, and then it goes to where it goes back and forth like people at a table, and you're just going to see all these different disciples and their various conversations, eventually to where they get around this campfire, and they start talking about a whole bunch of stuff. They start talking about expectations and following the Messiah. They start talking about, you know, whether or not they were supposed to, like, be trained for military stuff. They talk about their schooling and everything. And they're all just standing around the campfire talking about this. And it has not cut a single time. The camera work is just amazing, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Even before we talk about the biblical stuff in this episode, that was amazing. I just thought it was a really cool shot, and how long it was, like all the different pieces involved where people are going in and out. I mean, I guess they could have done little tricky things, like there were sometimes where it goes behind a person's head, and I guess they could have snuck in a little, like, edit right there. I don't think they did. I think it was one continuous shot. But there are sometimes where you can do little tricks to cut it, like to just, you know, splice it or something. But it did seem like it was one continuous shot, so even if it wasn't, it was still an amazing feat. It was just spectacular, and if you didn't, like, notice that, go back and watch the episode. It's really cool that they pulled it off. All the actors are just coming in and out of the scene just so seamlessly and perfect, and it was just cool. But then, later on, after they've had this conversation at the fire, eventually Mary, Mother Mary, right, Jesus' Mother Mary, as opposed to Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary, she shows up, and they have a little conversation, and whenever she walks off, that's the first cut, I believe. Because after that, then it just goes into like a regular episode. For a while, I was thinking that the whole episode was going to be like just one ongoing cut, and I was like, well, this is going to be really cool. And it already was really cool. But man, like, I was like, wow, this is going to be like a very interesting feat. But overall, it was absolutely spectacular. And so I just really appreciated that, and I wanted to talk about that for a bit because I thought that was really neat. But like I said, while they're standing around the campfire, they talk about their expectations about the Messiah. They talk about other stuff as well, but that was the one thing that stuck out to me in particular, because you get to see that these different people had different expectations of the Messiah, which is consistent with what the Jews believed at that time. And it's actually interesting how the people who have the better understanding of the Messiah are the ones who weren't as schooled in the Torah and in the Old Testament. Mainly because they hadn't had their opinions about the Messiah shaped as much by the common rabbinic thought, I guess you could say. So, people like Thomas and Simon, and was Simon even in that part? I don't remember if he was. I'm going to have to rewatch the episode. I will, don't worry. I'll do my breakdown. But people like Thomas and James and John, they're talking about how they viewed the Messiah as this military leader, and they even, at one point, start quoting scripture. I think Thomas quotes Zechariah, and he's talking about how it talks about the Lord opposing the nations, and so they believed that they were going to have to go to war, and Thomas is saying, yeah, I think I still need to train for that, because they're still under the impression that they will have to go fight against the Romans. They still think that's what Jesus' main goal is here. Oh, video just rendered if you heard it. That's funny. So I'll get that episode up for you, that video up very quickly. But yeah, so they're talking about it, and you get to realize these guys have a very twisted understanding of what Jesus came to do. He didn't come to overthrow the Romans, and he actually has clarified that at certain things in in season 1. But I think he told that to Nicodemus. He did not tell that to these people, so it's consistent. Like, he hasn't explicitly told these people that. And this is going to be a thing that the disciples, they continue to wrestle with throughout Jesus' whole ministry, because it seems like he never really explicitly tells them that, to where it seems like even on the night he's getting arrested, Simon's like, yeah, it's time to go. Let's go. And he like chops off a guy's ear. But I thought that was really cool. And then it's finally Mary who speaks up. And I don't know if I have this quote written down perfectly, but she says something along these lines, because she seems to understand that Jesus is doing something a little bit different. She was like, I didn't really get the impression that we were going to be fighting against the Romans. And they start talking about living holy lives and stuff. And she says this, I don't think he is waiting for us to be holy. I think the whole point is that we can't be holy without him. And this is Mary Magdalene talking, right? She says, I think the whole point is that we can't be holy without him. And it kind of paused. And I was with my group of friends, right? I was watching it with my friends Sean, Zach, and Olivia. And then my mom was there as well. If you might have seen them in other videos we've done. We were watching it, and then it kind of paused. And I kind of looked at them. I was like, man, that'll preach. That was good. And then Philip, as if speaking for us, he was like, that was really good. And I was like, oh, okay. So Philip was kind of speaking on the audience's behalf in that part, and I thought that was really good. But then Mary shows up, Mother Mary, like the Virgin Mary, Jesus' mother. It's always hard because Mary was a very common name in the first century, and so you got to distinguish between all these people. So Mother Mary, she shows up, and she starts talking a little bit. They greet her and everything, and then whenever she walks off, that's our first cut. So all this stuff that's been going on, all this back and forth between the disciples, all the transition around the set, that's all been one continuous shot. And I thought that was so cool. And that's why the opening credits were at the very beginning, right? Because there was not, like, the opening part was that very long shot. And so I just thought that was neat. It might have been the majority of the episode. I'm not sure. I'll look at that whenever I actually start breaking the episode down and stuff. But very big portion of that was just one long shot. I thought that was really neat. But then once things start kind of going back to normal, we end up having this nighttime conversation where they're all sitting around a campfire. And personally, this is probably the scene that made this, man, I'm trying to decide. I don't know if I liked episode 2 or episode 3 more. I'm starting to lean towards episode 3, but I'm also not sure if it's just because it's the most recent one I've seen. But this particular scene, if I end up liking episode 3 better, it'll be because of the scene. Because this felt like moments that I've shared with my friends on multiple occasions. It's nighttime, you're sitting around a campfire, or maybe you're just out looking at the stars or something. and you start talking about God, and you start talking about your beliefs, and you start talking about your backstories, and you start basically sharing your stories, your testimonies, all this stuff. You get into some theological discussion. You start talking about how sometimes you just think God's like way greater than you could possibly understand, and you start realizing that you're not as great as you sometimes think you are. And so just the entire scene felt very familiar to me because I don't know, I've had that. Like there literally, one time I visited Israel, and I remember this moment where I was on this pier on the edge of the Sea of Galilee, and I was with a group of friends, and we were just having this nighttime discussion, just talking about God, sharing our stories. Something very similar to this. Obviously, in this, they're not in Galilee. They're actually up in like Syria, I guess, or something like that. But it made that like mental association with me, where I've had conversations just like this, and you get to see the disciples bonding, and they're just sharing their various stories. And I just thought that was really cool because it felt very familiar to me. And it really just kind of sucked me into the episode where I was like, wow, I've been in this situation. It made the disciples feel like real people. And you get to learn different flavors of these different characters, right? You get to see, okay, who are the rule followers here? Who are not the rule followers? Who are the more impulsive people? Who are the more well-versed in scripture? Who are the silent ones? Who are the talkative ones? You get to see all these different things just in this little conversation. And it's always nice having little, the crackling fire in the background. So I thought that was cool. But one thing that really stuck out to me here is that Thomas gets kind of shaken up because Mary, she starts talking about Jesus's birth and stuff like that. And she kind of gets into this thing that I thought was really sweet, where she talks about how after Joseph died, Jesus started growing up even faster, right? Because as a mother, she already felt like Jesus was growing up too fast. But once Joseph, his earthly father, like once he died, I guess stepfather, once he died, Jesus started growing up even more because, Jesus is the oldest son. And so part of it, like, she says that as a Jew, she's excited to see God's promises coming to fulfillment. But as a mother, it makes her sad because she doesn't want to see Jesus grow up. In her eyes, he's still her little boy. And then after she walks off, Thomas makes a comment. And he says, I didn't realize that Jesus lost his dad. I'm going to have to ask him about that. And then they start talking about, have any of y'all lost your parents? And then Mary mentions that she did. And she gives a little bit of her backstory. But I don't know, that moment, like, that was what really connected with me. I know that in episode 2, Dallas mentioned how he really resonated with Nathaniel because his story is very similar. But listening to Thomas talk here is what really made me feel like, oh man, I might really relate to Thomas because if you know my story, I was actually studying to be an engineer, and then now I'm going into ministry. And so I was going for this job that was going to pay a lot of money, and then now I'm in one that's a big question mark. And Thomas is in a very similar situation, right? He had some money, and now he even talked about it in this episode how he's probably not going to have a lot of money as long as they're with Jesus. But more particularly in the loss of Thomas's father, because for those of y'all who don't really know me that well, I actually lost my father less than a year ago. We're actually approaching, we just passed 11 months, and he died on May 8th, 2020. I was actually with him. We were riding our bicycles together, and then he crashed, and I held him in my arms and everything. It was sad. He was my best friend. But it was actually, like, just thinking about the fact that Jesus also lost his father, that, I don't know, that meant something to me as well. I've actually thought about that in the past year. I think I wrote a blog about it. If you want to go check out my blog, go look at www.nowletsbehonest.com. I don't really post a lot of blogs on there, but I did write a lot of them in the wake of my father's death because I think I just process things through writing. And I wrote one, I think I called it like Jesus Lost His Dad Too or something. And I actually thought a lot about that in the wake of my father's death because I realized, like Jesus also, it seems like he went through that. We don't know for sure that Joseph, when Joseph died, but the way that Mary treats Jesus and the way that Jesus treats Mary and stuff throughout the Gospels, it would seem to imply that Joseph is dead at this point. At least sometime between Jesus was, at some point in between the time when Jesus was 12 and 30. And so I like that they addressed that because it really helped me relate to Thomas. Because Thomas was like, oh, I didn't realize that he lost his dad. I mean, I lost my dad. I'll have to talk to him about it. And that's something that I, talk to Jesus, like try to talk to Jesus about every day. Because whenever I lost my dad, I was like, man, Jesus, there's something comforting about knowing that Jesus knows that pain. He's felt that pain. And I don't know, I just thought that was a really sweet scene, and it kind of almost made me tear up a little bit. I'm not a guy who tears up very easily, but just watching that scene, I was like, oh, Like it hit me right in the feels, and so I really appreciated that they included that, and it fleshes out the characters, right? I thought it was really cool, but personally, that was probably the most I've ever connected to one of the characters in the show. Even though I get bits and pieces of myself in all of them, because I think we're supposed to, because whenever people write characters, they always put bits and pieces of themselves into them, and I think as audience members, we relate to one another, right? So. Yeah, but I just really like that little moment where Thomas, it was just like a subtle comment that resulted in a greater conversation about just losing parents and stuff, but that really hit home with me. But this whole scene culminates where Simon just, he kills the mood, right? They're having a great time. They're bonding with one another. And Simon notices that Matthew's been quiet, and they started talking about the Roman occupation. And Thomas, you can see that he's very frustrated by this because he's like, oh, I wish that the Roman occupation never happened. I don't get why God did this to his chosen people. And Simon finally turns to Matthew. He's like, Matthew, how do you feel about the Roman occupation? And he just totally kills the mood. And what we need to realize here is that Simon isn't wrong in his accusations. He's just wrong in how he's going about it. And I think Andrew does point this out at the beginning of Simon's accusation, because he's like, or I think earlier in the episode, maybe. Like I said, I'll rewatch it. But at some point, Andrew does comment, and he's like, hey, like Simon, he just needs to be a little bit, he could be a little more graceful with how he says things. But Simon's not wrong. Matthew was a traitor. He did, he was, he wasn't doing the right thing. But how Simon handled it is not not the proper way to handle it. It's also a very self-righteous way of handling things, because even whenever James and John, they don't really come to Matthew's defense. They're just trying to call Simon out on stuff. They said, hey, dude, you're not perfect either. But, Simon kind of like, well, I didn't go through with it. Well, that's not a good justification. I mean, you still got to realize he was trying to minimize his sin while elevating Matthew's, and that's never a good position to be in. It could very well be possible that Simon's was a lesser sin and Matthew's was a greater one. It actually seems like that was the case. But whenever you're calling somebody else out on something, you never want to minimize your own sin, right? That's the whole judge not lest ye be judged. Jesus isn't saying don't judge. He's saying if you're going to judge somebody else, you got to judge yourself even more harshly, right? The same standard you measure out on others will be measured back on you, so you better, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And Simon, he was kind of approaching it from a very self-righteous manner, but I just felt kind of bad because, man, he totally killed the mood. They were having such a good time bonding, and then Simon had to just come in, and it just ended up so tense. But the whole episode ends with Jesus finally entering in. And Jesus, he only has a few lines, right? He doesn't say anything to the disciples other than, good night. But he walks in, and what's been going on this whole episode is that, Matthew 4:24, Jesus has been healing people this entire time. He's been slaving endlessly throughout the whole day. And whenever he shows up, man, he looks rough because he has been helping people out nonstop. And it really seems to convict the disciples. And I don't blame them for being convicted, because here they are bickering about all this stuff and just accusing one another of stuff. They've just gotten all this just bitter fighting, and they've totally forgotten about the one person who's supposed to unify them. He's over here serving all these people who have done nothing for him but ask something from him. And they're over here getting mad at each other because they're butthurt about a few things. And so Jesus shows up, and they see how disheveled he is, and he says, I'm going to bed. And then you can see, especially John, he tears up because you can see he feels it. He's like, oh, what were we doing? We were so selfish. We were so proud. We were so focused on ourselves that we forgot that we're supposed to be united in Christ. We forgot the thing that united us. We were so focused on ourselves, we forgot to focus on him. And so then Mary, Mother Mary, right, she comes up and she starts washing Jesus' feet. And she does all the things that really the disciples probably should have been doing. And then Jesus thanks her, and he goes to bed. And then the final shot is it's just panning out, and they're all just standing there awkwardly because they realize they really messed up. And I thought that was a fantastic way to end it. Like I said, it was a shorter episode, but man, it really struck some chords, and I thought it was fantastic. It shows the disciples aren't perfect. It also points out that sometimes you might have a good point, but you might not make that point in the best way, right? All because you're right doesn't mean that you're right in pointing that out. So Simon, he's correct in pointing out that Matthew had some issues that Matthew hasn't really apologized for. But also, as a follower of Christ, you shouldn't always require somebody to apologize in order to forgive them. Simon also said, I'm never going to forgive you. I'm never going to forgive you. And I imagine maybe possibly this will set up where maybe in the next episode or in the episodes to come, he'll walk up to Jesus and say, how many times should I forgive somebody? 7? And Jesus will say, 70 times 7. Right? So this, you can see where this is setting stuff up. And I'm thinking that's where that might be where they're heading. I don't know. But like I said, fantastic episode. Can't praise it enough. And I just continue to be encouraged by what this show is accomplishing. But that being said, I've talked long enough. At this point, I've talked for like 40 minutes because I just talked about episode 2 and now episode 3. I'm going to get these videos uploaded to you as quickly as I possibly can. And then I'm going to go back and I will do my episode breakdowns of both episode 2 and episode 3 as soon as I possibly can, given my schedule. You know, I work part-time. I'm a full-time student. I've got family. I've got friends. I got stuff I got to take care of. But I'll get those breakdowns to you as soon as I possibly can. I'm going to need to rewatch the episodes probably another 1 or 2 times because I like to get down all the scriptural references and stuff like that. But then I'll get those to you as quickly as I can. But that being said, I have nothing else to say. So please, if you enjoyed this video, like this video, subscribe to the channel so we can continue, so you can see more of these videos and I can interact with you. And comment below and let me know what you liked about this episode, or if you didn't like the episode, tell me your favorite things about it, or just say hi. You know, just do whatever you want. I like interacting with y'all. That's my favorite thing. That's why I make these videos. I don't make them just so I can talk to a video and feed my ego. I do this because I want to interact with y'all and I want to point people to Christ. And so please comment below and let's just have discussions that glorify Jesus, that honor him, and that will point people to him. And let's just talk about the show. Let's talk about the Bible. Let's talk about anything that can just, you know, edify one another and point people to God. But that being said, I'll stop talking now. If you don't know who I am, I'm David Tate, and this channel is Now Let's Be Honest About Movies, where we talk about anything media related, not just movies. But this has been The Chosen Season 2, Episode 3, entitled Matthew 4:24. There are a lot of numbers there. And I will see you next time, I'm guessing, for the episode breakdowns, unless they surprise us with episode 4. I didn't actually watch. I don't know if they announced when episode 4 is coming out, but I'll figure that out soon. That being said, I will see you later. Have a great day. Bye!